The next element is around the quarterly business reviews. Essentially, how do we align holistically for planning in a rhythm that is more focused on the next quarter's delivery? But this is not just about next quarter. We typically start with annual planning. So what you'd be fairly familiar with doing today. But what we tend to focus on in annual planning is capacity. How do we set up the capacity for the teams to deliver? Typically based on a return on investment. So we are going to give X dollars to teams to deliver Y outcomes. And that return on investment is what we're willing to spend on that team. So once you've had your fights around who gets what money in annual planning, it's only done once, you move into a quarterly cycle where you focus more on what is the right things to be doing, not the constant battle over whose team gets the bigger, whose teams gets the resources. So the real unlock for this is really making that conversation, are we working on the right stuff? And this typically starts with a top level view on what's important, called a QBR memo, where we manage what's important, typically done through objectives and key results. That's then given or cascaded down to the teams to do plan, often in big room planning, where the teams work out how are they going to deliver on those objectives over the quarter. The teams come back, refine, revolves the dependencies, the risks and everything else. And we refine the QBR memo, which is essentially the blueprint in prose, written in prose, similar to the Amazon type principles of write it down. It's the only way you get a shared understanding of, which is then cascaded to the teams of why we are doing. And I think the key thing around QBR memo is not just focus on what we want to do, but focus on who's it for, what do they want, and why is it so important? And with that, we create a shared understanding of how the teams deliver and what the teams need to do to deliver. And so we get the teams to deliver. Obviously, there's either monthly or mid-quarter check-ins to check we're on the right path. Often when you first start on this, the checks from finance and strategy tend to be a bit more focused. But as you go, these check-ins become a lot more fluid discussion of, are you achieving the results you expected to do with the work you're doing? And that continues sort of every cycle. Ideally, you have some movements at the end of the quarter to check what we're focusing on for the next quarter, but these are minimal movements. The annual planning cycle is where you sort of do, let's say, the more bigger movements of people across the organization, which, as we know, every time you move someone, you're disrupting a team. So hopefully that gives you an overview of the sort of the key elements which we look at typically first in an Agile operating model.